Efforts in Canada continue working towards reconciliation with our Indigenous peoples, but not everyone agrees as to how that should happen and what needs to be done. So joining me today to discuss this is Deborah Minoose. She is a reverend and the president of the Shekinah Aboriginal Ministries Association of Alberta. She also has her master's in Christian ministries, I believe. Deborah, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, I'm so blessed and honored to be here and to share my perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so Deborah, I understand that you yourself attended a residential school. You've also, I believe, written a book about your experience called Scooped, a Stolen Generation. Can you maybe share what your experience was like?
Yes, definitely. I basically had been taken away from my family at a very young age. I was 4, and there was 6 in my family. Myself and my older brother, we went into one home, and the other children were all separated into 3 different homes. We were all into 3 different homes, and our family basically, my grandfather, he was the hereditary chief of the community in Calling Lake, which is about 130 miles north of Edmonton. And they went after the kids that were, predominantly, leaders in the community. So then everybody just followed suit. So this was everywhere, all across Canada, that had happened. And fortunately, I was in a good home at the beginning. I was in a wonderful home with some people that were Christian, that were loving and kind. And later on, I went into a facility because they had, wanted us to be switched. And a lot of times that was a problem. So many children, unfortunately, were taken from one facility to another, one home to another. And that caused a lot of, problems for the children. So I do talk about that in my book quite a bit, residential school and what it looked like and how it affected, our people and the whole, system that it had developed into this nation. And anyways, the scooped part of it, basically, I had learned as I was doing research on the book, was that the term was coined by uh, a worker. She was a social worker. This was during the early 60s.
Yeah, you're
And she
talking
said,
about the 60s scoop, right?
yeah,
Which
the
you
60s
you were
scoop.
a part of.
Yeah. And she basically was going into the home and into different communities, into the homes, scooping up the kids, leaving. Another home, scooping up the kids, leaving. And she coined the term, I'm scooping the kids. So this became the term for the 60s scoop. And there were like pictures all across Canada in the media, as well as newspapers is the media, and magazines and whatnot, of Native children that were being adopted all across Canada and taken into other countries, into a lot of the states, but I heard of other children going into other countries as well. So they were just, adopted out, and the poor parents never got to see their children again.
That is
So
unbelievable, Deborah. Did you ever
yeah.
see your parents again or
Oh
your
yeah,
other?
I did. Like later on in like my teens, I was able to finally connect with my father and my stepmom. My mom had passed away, unfortunately, when I was 9 while I was in the home. And it had a great impact upon me, as well as my brothers and sisters. And the whole idea of living in different homes all those years and then coming back to our community, not knowing our language, not knowing our people, not knowing, different aspects of our Indigenous lifestyle. When we came back to the community, it was very hard for us to be able to cope with that and to deal with that. Some ended up, in different situations because of it. Myself, well, God had a plan for me. There was something that hit our community, And there was a powerful move of God. A revival happened actually, and when I was 16, and it turned the place upside down for God. It was wonderful, but not all communities were as blessed and fortunate, and many had suffered great deal along with myself. I had many years of dysfunction, many years of not knowing who I was, the identity problems, and just not having a lot of trust for people that were not my people group for many years, and until God got a hold of me and healed and restored my life and my
Right.
heart.
It just makes me wonder, how did these people have the right to do that, to go into other people's homes and steal their children away from them? Did you end up feeling a lot of anger towards these people, or towards the church, or towards white people in general?
Yes, I did. I had many years where I felt so much resentment, so much pain and loss, of course, and I felt hatred, towards the Caucasian group, and I was like that for many years. I was in denial of it until, when God shows us where our heart truly is, then it's just grace the whole time that's on our lives. But basically I was just so full of uh I guess wanting to get back somehow or another. For many years I was like that, and until God got a hold of my life.
Yeah. So looking back, Deborah, do you believe that the church and the government leaders were intentionally trying to harm First Nations people through this residential school program? Or do you think, that they were like well intentioned at the time and simply didn't understand the consequences of this, or, how it would have had such a negative impact?
Well, I think that in some aspects, yes, they were blind by the fact, like just kind of going, oh, we're going to, help them to assimilate, help them to, come to live in a different lifestyle, come to, be in this, society and live like everybody else. And this is how we're going to do it. So they got the churches involved, the different churches involved, the Anglican, the Catholic. I know for that, for my researching with residential schools, that this was the case, as well as it moved on into 60 scoop. But it was I guess at the beginning, something they thought was a good thing for our
Yeah. And
people.
that's not to give them a pass on this, at all,
No,
because of
no,
what
no,
happened. It
no,
was
but it is
terrible.
good to understand the facts, and this is just the facts. And the facts is this is actually what had happened. And then later on, when somebody gets to know and understand what they're doing, then we have to be accountable for it, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
And Deborah, for reconciliation to happen, the offending party usually must acknowledge the wrongs and apologize and ask for forgiveness and make restitution where needed. So there has been a lot of apologies made both from the church and the federal government, and there have been very large sums of money paid to indigenous groups. But has this been helpful? Do you think more of these kinds of things need to happen?
Yeah, I believe there are various things that need to happen, not just giving out money, because that's not always going to be, the whole thing that fixes everything, right? Like I was there actually when the prime minister, I was in Ottawa when he gave that, apology. And that was such a huge thing. I was with a lot of non-believers, but for me, him saying that was huge. That was huge for him to say that, to acknowledge that, because I'm a minister and I know the Bible and what it talks about in somebody at the high level like that, the highest level in the country, to apologize to the people. is a tremendous, tremendous thing. And then the ramifications of it afterwards, and all the different things that came about because of it, and the payments that are going on. I believe that, that has helped, but I also believe that there needs to be, more programs like, there's this one where there's the healing blanket where you sit and you kind of learn about the community, you learn how it is to have been a residential school survivor child, and you sit on this blanket. Like, that was tremendous for me to learn about that. That kind of thing needs to happen more, like in our school systems, right? And different things, like if people are going into jobs, that they need to learn about that kind of thing, as well as other types of things that can occur where you're employing more First Nations people. I say more in the church, because here in Edmonton, there is not a large population of First Nations ministers within the churches here employed that I see. I've been living here since the 70s, me and my family. I probably witnessed maybe 2 churches in the whole city that actually wanted First Nations people to be a part of their, denomination and work within the system. And yeah, it's a real problem with racism here. And Edmonton is actually the largest population of Indigenous people in all of Canada now. It has surpassed Winnipeg in the last couple of years, where it's almost, what is it, 700,000 that is in the city alone of First Nations, and all of them, well, not all of them, I'd say probably about 75% are under the age of 18, 19 years old. So that's huge.
That is.
And
That's
they're moving
unbelievable.
from their native communities into the city. So we could easily have, like, 15 churches and work with our people with whatever needs that they have, and still not have enough, right? So that's a big thing. I as a First Nations minister working with First Nations youth in the city, I would really love to see more of that.
Yeah, no kidding. So, are there any particular things you'd like to see Canadian churches to do to foster healing and reconciliation?
Well, like I said, with the healing blanket,
Yeah,
where you're
that's
sitting,
very
and
practical.
yeah, it is very,
Hmm.
exactly, it's very practical, as well as like doing more programs where you're feeding the
Yeah,
First Nations.
yeah,
Like, I go downtown on a regular basis just to see, my brothers and sisters that are on the street, just to see. I live in the south side of the city. I'm
yeah.
not around it, but I go to remember, like, who was the ones that God reached out to, who was the ones that Jesus reached out to. So I see a lot of my people, unfortunately, there, besides other nations, and more programs to be helping, the people that are on the street. Like, my own family goes out every winter and will take a little baggie with socks, some practical little items a person would use, hand warmers, right? Mittens, gloves, toque, and a little $5 Starbucks card. And they're so appreciative. They're so appreciative of it, that somebody actually cared enough to give them that,
Exactly.
right?
So along those lines, as we talked about, like what the churches and like schools and employers can do, are there some practical things that you'd like to see the government do that would foster better relations with First Nations people?
I guess for better relations would be for them to actually. I wanted to see a program like this where they actually went and lived in a Native community for maybe a month. Some of the leaders to come in there and live and see exactly how they live. Like, I just want to give a little tiny example. When I was just a little girl, right? And my family, they were very, very predominant in feeding the whole community. And my grandfather and a lot of men, they would go out. This is part of our culture. And they would hunt. They would hunt for, moose or deer. And they'd bring back, like maybe 10 or 12 moose, and they would cut them up, divvy it up and give it to the whole community, like, 40, 50 families. Okay. And I remember that time it was just a wonderful time. And my aunts and my mom and my grandmothers, they were cutting up the meat and some of the blood spilt on a carpet. Well, a few days later, a worker comes in and sees the blood. She doesn't understand, that's from cutting up meat. This is a traditional thing that we did.
Mm.
So us kids were taken away for that.
Because of that.
Yeah, because of that.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. And it was terrible. I still think about it to this day. I was just thinking about it this morning. It's like, there's a little story that I can share. Like they need to come in and see how we live, what we live like, the way that we put our home isn't the way that somebody else, because there's a reason for it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, we got
Yeah.
cultural differences happening there.
Yeah.
Yeah, right in our own
It's good
country.
to understand.
Yeah.
Like I have a love for cultures now, like different nations now because of what I've been through.
Oh gosh, amazing, Deborah. Your story, we're out of time here, but we could talk about this all day. Seriously, you've got so many stories to tell, but we thank you so much for being with us today, Deborah. Really appreciate having you on.
God bless you.
Deborah Minoose is the president of the Shekinah Aboriginal Ministries Association of Alberta.